Alright, this video is one that's been a long time coming. Seriously, I think I've put this off for about 6 months? Mass Effect Andromeda was my favorite game of 2017. There, I fucking said it.
Grab your torch and pitchforks!
Now before you go screaming in the comments saying, "What? How could you say that? It was awful. What are you doing, man?" I'm not saying that it was the best game of 2017, or even that it was a particularly great game. What I am saying is that I feel the hatred was really overblown. The game isn't that bad, and depending on what you're looking for, you might actually really enjoy it, like I did. So I'm calling this a Blitz rant, because that's kind of my thing, but there's really nothing Blitz about it. We're going to be here for a while, so go take a piss, grab some popcorn, come back after the titles. If you listen to the internet, you'd be justified in thinking that Mass Effect Andromeda is the worst game ever made. I've seen it compared to Duke Nukem Forever, I've even seen it compared to Big Rig's over-the-road racing, and I think that's really unfair because while it's flawed, it doesn't fail basic gameplay mechanics like Big Rig's over-the-road racing. That's barely a game. I think a better comparison would actually be Daikatana. Daikatana was pretty fucking bad. Like, I hated it, and I gave it, I think, a 1 out of 5. But it's not the worst game ever made. There were a lot of good ideas in it, and it's not totally irredeemable. They kind of had this grand vision, a team that didn't really know how to get it together, years of hype, delays. In the end, everyone was kind of disappointed, even if they had some good ideas in there. Yeah, I'm talking about both games here, Daikatana and Mass Effect Andromeda. And while I shit all over Daikatana, with glee actually, I'm not inclined to do the same to Andromeda because I actually enjoyed what came out despite its flaws. Okay, so what the hell is Mass Effect Andromeda about? Well, you can go read the description on the wiki, but in summary, just before the Reapers totally fucked up the Milky Way, a few tens of thousands of people, various races, left for Andromeda for, I guess, exploration and colonization, and definitely not because the genocidal machines were coming. Seriously, it's like a plot point in this game that the Reapers are, like, you kind of know, but you don't really know. Anyway, 600 years later, you wake up, everything's gone to hell, like, shit's on fire. You're Ryder, the new Pathfinder. I actually really like Ryder. And together with your AI companion Sam, not that Sam, this Sam, you have to find a new home and save the expedition. Yeah, I'm probably going to call it the Andromeda Expedition a lot. It's actually the Andromeda Initiative. Andromeda Expedition Atlantis and Andromeda Expedition. Fuck. Mass Effect Andromeda was a pretty good game. What? Okay, I mean that literally. It was good, not great, but good, and it was really pretty. Like, seriously. There's a reason it kept showing up on show floors at, like, I think, Computex, even after everyone started hating it. I've heard some people say that it doesn't look much better than Mass Effect 3, and I'm like, what are you smoking? Look, either you're playing on a potato or you're just blind, because the lighting is a quantum leap above, the materials are just a hell of a lot better, the textures are sharp, the models are smooth, they don't have any rough edges. Yeah, this is the most beautiful game I've ever played. Sorry, Witcher 3, you take a close second. And while I try not to let visuals make or break a game, I really try to see past that. There are times when I just wanted to sit there and take in the scenery and hammer the screenshot button. It's just that kind of game, and they did that really well. The combat too is another massive strength of this game. Look, in the original trilogy, mostly I didn't look forward to combat. I felt that it was a good RPG in a lot of ways, but a really terrible shooter, and shooting sections are like half the game. That's not the case here. I actually usually looked forward to the shooting sections. Andromeda just blows the original trilogy out of the water here. The guns feel punchy, the powers are actually useful, you can jump around like a jackrabbit, that's pretty cool. This is probably one of the few games, yeah, I think the last game I played with any significant vertical element was Tribes 2. So yeah, you can jump around, and it is limited, but it's really cool. It's not a terrible RPG either, especially mechanically. Loot is back. There's an inventory, there's a crafting system, there's improved weapon and armor mods. Yeah, it's not as extensive as something like Fallout 4, and it can get really clunky at times, but I do feel that, in general, it's the fusion of the best of Mass Effect 1 and 2 and 3. And it just... even just this makes it feel a lot more like a proper RPG than its immediate predecessors. And yeah, there's some weaknesses with the RPG systems, and I will get to those later. There is some light management and settlement building. It's pretty token, but it adds some flavor to the game, and it does fit within the narrative. It's definitely not as extensive as, say, Fallout 4, where you can build settlements to your heart's content, all kinds of weird shit. But it does definitely feel like a good addition, and it adds to the feel of being, you know, a pioneer in a new galaxy, so I think this is a good element. You know, one of the best things about Andromeda isn't something that's entirely tangible, and that's its atmosphere. It just has this great kind of sense of wonderment that there's this whole galaxy to explore, and this comes through in the gameplay, in the scenery. It's just there. Right, and this is something I haven't felt since the first game. Mass Effect 2 and 3 to me, they felt visceral, they felt gritty, and in 3, desperate. Mass Effect 1 had this kind of airy, wondrous feel. Like, yeah, there's evil machines on their way, everybody's gonna die, but there's like this air of discovery. And that's back with Andromeda, and I really like it. And of course, this is subjective as hell. If you preferred the feel of Mass Effect 2 and 3, Andromeda might be a little bit of a letdown for you, and I will get to this near the end. I'll revisit this. And it is a lot more open of a game. It's not just a feel of openness, it is a lot more open. You have a rover again, the Nomad, and unlike the Firewalker sections in Mass Effect 2, for instance, you can actually roam around planets of a decent size. I think they might be bigger than Mass Effect 1, they feel bigger. There aren't as many though, and I'll get into that later when I start talking about the serious flaws in this game. But anyway, yeah, a lot of it is just getting from point A to point B. There's quite a bit of set dressing, not a lot of encounters, but I just love the experience of driving around sometimes, and with the atmosphere and the visuals, it's just fun. And there are some really cool linear and semi-linear sections as well. There's the aforementioned verticality in most of those, which really feels natural once you get used to it, and they built some levels that really take advantage of this. And to their credit, you'll rarely hit things like insurmountable waist-high fences, like in, say, New Vegas. If it looks like you can go over something, you can probably go over it. The arena sections, and there are quite a few of these, generally give you a good mix of cover and mobility. You can play these how you want, and usually the levels are pretty straightforward, for better or for worse. Yeah, there's not a lot of puzzling, but there's not a lot of shitty mazes either, with one really notable exception. And again, when I talk about the flaws, I'll get to that. And yeah, I'm probably going to spend more time talking about the flaws, so I will, I'm going to qualify that, yeah, there are serious flaws, but these upshots that I've described, these are really big strengths for the game. It's not just a little bit better than the original trilogy in a few minor areas, it's way better in a few areas that really matter. Unfortunately, of course, it has issues. Yeah, so, holy shit does it have issues. If you didn't like like I said, I felt that on balance Andromeda was a good game, I liked it, but if you didn't like it, there are many reasons to dislike this game. Let's start with the new mood-based conversation system. I've heard that this is derived from the one in Dragon Age. I've actually never played Dragon Age, so I couldn't tell ya. It replaces the old Paragon Renegade system. There's no morality system anymore, and I think it was a good idea in principle, not to distill things into this black and white morality, to give you more choices in how to respond. The problem is, it doesn't really matter. people respond the same way no matter how you approach them. There's no Deus Ex style social engineering, there's no rewards for consistency in behavior, there's nothing like that, there's no continuity. Any decisions that actually matter are going to be very obvious, and they're going to be reduced to very simple binary choices. Do this or do that, independent of the mood system. Yeah, that's too bad, because they had a good idea, but they just didn't take advantage of it. And speaking of decisions, there are not that many of them in this game, and none of them really seem to matter that much. It's not a player punch the way it was in Mass Effect 3, where up to this point you decided, and now all your decisions don't mean anything. No, it's more like the game isn't really about that to begin with, so it's not a player punch, it doesn't kick you in the nads, but it's definitely a little disappointing. It feels like a step backwards. It's pretty lazy, kinda lame. And the storyline itself, I've already forgotten most of it. It's just okay. There are a few twists, most of which you'll see a mile away. It's not hugely compelling. When you really boil it down, the original trilogy storyline wasn't amazing either. It was pretty cliched, but at least it was well presented. Andromeda is really hackneyed. They try to throw in this theme of synthetics and organics working together, and well, it's really poorly executed. It feels like they just kind of tacked it on at the last minute to give it some thematic connection to the original trilogy. Andromeda's storytelling, in my mind, is at its best when it's about pushing the frontier, exploring new worlds, meeting new people, when you're focusing on those ideas, those themes. When it turns to this philosophical navel-gazing about AIs and morality and mortality, and it just gets bogged down. Walking through alien ruins with an AI able to interface with alien technology like Jeff Goldblum's fucking Power Book. Wait, we're not talking about Halo? Yeah. These sections of the game are not only extremely derivative, like, constantly. I'm just thinking Halo ripoff, Halo ripoff, Halo ripoff. They're also the worst sections of the game, gameplay-wise. Anyway, basically, there's these ancient ruins that you have to go through all these puzzles to activate and shit, and oh, fuck, you're gonna be looking for a guide. Like, they're fairly frequent sections, they're marked shifts from the open world gameplay, and they're just, like, frustrating and not satisfying at all. They just kinda suck. Yeah, and they're core to the game, you can't avoid these, so... Which is too bad, because usually the level design is good, but these core sections fucking suck. Okay, calming down a bit. The characters. The characters are honestly a mixed bag. I really liked Ryder, oddly enough. A lot of people hate Ryder. I really liked Ryder. As much as Shepard, maybe not, but I thought she, or I guess he if you play male, was a decent protagonist. The squad mates, on the other hand, well, I like Peebee. I like Y'all. Vetra was okay. Liam, I wanted to throw out a fucking airlock. Cora was just boring. Why'd they write a book about her? She's probably the most boring character there. Drac was kind of a swing and a miss. They tried to do the same thing as Rex, but Rex was a lot better. And it's not like we haven't had lousy squad mates before, Jacob. But there were only 6 this time around, so any ones that weren't pulling their weight were really felt. And the supporting cast, it's serviceable. I don't recall any real shining stars there. So, yeah, characters, okay. I mentioned the RPG elements earlier as a strength, but there are 2 pretty serious issues that I would like to point out. The first is that you can no longer directly control your squad mates in combat. You can't equip them, you can still level them. And that really feels backwards, especially considering the other changes to the combat, the other changes to the RPG elements. And it doesn't make your squad mates completely useless, but they're a lot less useful because you can't, like, combo with them. You can't predict when they're going to activate their powers. Like, their abilities are pretty good, but you have no idea when they're going to use them. The other issue is that there are no real classes in Andromeda, which can work. If you look at any Bethesda RPG, it flows organically. It's not a problem. In this one, you pick a starting class, quote unquote, but it's basically just a starting bonus, and then after that you can switch between profiles that boost certain things and just invest points wherever you want. The whole skill tree is unlocked, and the idea is great, but it's just really poorly balanced in this case. None of these skills have a huge type or situational advantage despite being really specific. So if you just pick a few and level the shit out of them, I think I had Incinerate and Overload and I believe pistols and assault rifles. You'll just be ridiculously OP by mid-game, maybe even like early mid-game. And while exploration is a big thing, I mentioned that earlier, and there's a lot more openness to the game, the world still feels pretty damn small. There are only 2 alien races, one good and one bad. You get to land on a handful of planets, and one of them is, like, seriously half-assed. This probably came from scope limitations. I think originally they wanted to make... Well, originally what they wanted to make was basically No Man's Sky, but with story and non-sucking. But what they ended up with really does feel stifling at times. And again, a lot of these are not minor flaws, they're pretty serious flaws. I wouldn't classify any of them as ones that break the game completely, but they definitely take away from it. And I'm not going to argue that there are not issues with their game, there are. But I don't think it deserves the amount of hate it gets. Well, I think a lot of the hate was because Mass Effect Andromeda was flawed like every Mass Effect game. Don't deny that. I mean, Mass Effect 3 had some serious issues, but it was flawed in a different way. Like, yeah, Andromeda is a mixed bag, and maybe even more good than bad, but it's good and bad in all the wrong ways. It's not good in ways we'd expect and bad in ways we'd expect. The things that we thought were going to be really good weren't, and the things that we were expecting to be okay were good? We know intuitively what a BioWare game is supposed to be. It's in every fan's consciousness, right? Even if in reality, you know, a lot of our past favorites might not have lived up to that. So in this case, we had a mediocre storyline, we had shallow choices, and we had a small cast of really kind of middling characters. And that's really glaring, because that's not what a BioWare game is supposed to be. And on the other hand, we weren't terribly impressed by having, you know, dramatically better combat, for instance, because, yeah, I mean, combat in a BioWare game, it's gonna be okay, right? So we got exploration and atmosphere, but that's not something that was big after Mass Effect 1. We have a game that was glitchy, and while we'd expect that in other games, yeah, I'm looking at you, Fallout. I still have that save bug 8 years later, and I crash every fucking hour of gameplay New Vegas. And you, clusterfuck that is Nier Automata on PC, still. But BioWare games are supposed to be rock solid, they're supposed to be stable, they're the top tier high quality shit. So Andromeda just wasn't what we expected. It was weak where we thought it was going to be strong, and it was strong where it should have been weak. It defied expectations, but not in a good way. Look, I'm a huge fan of the series, and I loved Andromeda, but I can see where people are coming from here. Well, and it was just fun to laugh at the faces. Like, even after the fixes, this game did sometimes make me laugh for the wrong reasons. Like, yeah, I was intent to just laugh, and yeah, you know, it's got issues. Her ponytail's all fucked up. That's funny. That line was weird. That's funny. But I'm laughing at the game, you know? But anyway, in a lot of ways, Mass Effect Andromeda was the game I was looking for. Mass Effect 1 was my favorite in the series, and Andromeda brought a lot of that back. And I think they actually made some deliberate references to that, but that was probably a bad fucking idea, considering that most fans prefer the second and third games, so you tried to remake the first, why? Anyway, another thing is that I am a game dev, please buy my game, I'm poor. And because of that, I'm inclined to cut some slack for certain things, especially for a project like this that had huge scope, grand vision, and deeply troubled development. Yeah, I wasn't happy with some of its omissions, but I enjoyed what it did have, and I understood why it didn't have some things. In the end, I left disappointed. Not because of the game itself, I really enjoyed Andromeda, but it was a shaky start. But it was a start. It was like the start of a new adventure, and it feels it throughout the whole game. It's full of hooks for DLCs and a sequel, but, you know, EA is as EA does, and they shit-canned the series and liquidated the dev team, which actually seemed a bit odd to me, because apparently Andromeda made money. Yeah, despite all the negative publicity, despite apparently sucking shit, this game made money. But that could have been because of its multiplayer, and, oh, the multiplayer. I didn't like the multiplayer. The gameplay is just not all that compelling. It's an okay-ish wave shooter. As an adjunct to the campaign, you know, it's okay. In fact, I thought that was really neat, and done far better than it was in Mass Effect 3. There are these Apex missions which you can start from within the campaign, and they'll give you a few bonuses on successful completion. Play those in multiplayer, but it's optional. You don't have to do them, and you can resolve them other ways, actually. But they saddled, and I'm going to use the word saddled because I don't see this as a plus. They saddled the multiplayer component with this grindy fucking progression system, loot box-based equipment, and it's not linked to the campaign, so it's basically impossible, or at least unenjoyable, to play as an occasional, to play an occasional round of multiplayer during the campaign. Even if you're late game in the campaign, your rider character is a walking tank, your strike teams are kick-ass, and by the way, the difficulty of the Apex missions does scale up in the campaign, yes. Your multiplayer character is stuck at level 1 with a worthless fucking pea shooter. They've essentially crippled the single-player multiplayer by making the multiplayer itself so intensive. And again, I just don't find it that compelling. It's okay, but it's not great. I don't see why I'd play this over something like EA's own Battlefield or Battlefront or something completely different like Overwatch. But you know, apparently it's appealing enough to get people to sink money into it, so I guess I can't criticize it too much, yeah? I will admit that I went in with pretty low expectations. I knew Andromeda wasn't Mass Effect 4. I was not excited about having a new galaxy and new characters, and by the time I actually got around to playing it, I tried it in April of last year, but didn't get around to seriously playing it until about August, maybe? So by that point, I'd already heard about the development issues. But on the other hand, I paid 80 Canadian at launch, which is, for me, a lot of money to spend on a game. And I upgraded my rig. I went eGPU, I sank probably $1,200 into an enclosure and a high-end graphics card, mostly just to play Andromeda. And you know, I walked away kind of saddened, but not because I didn't like the experience. I loved this game. Yeah, it was broken. It was a little bit, it was more than a little bit broken, but it also kicked ass in a lot of ways, and I really wanted more of that. It should have been the start of a kick-ass new series, the first shaky entry, still trying to get its bearings. Yeah, remember Mass Effect 1? It was pretty fucking rough. And Andromeda 2 would have been kick-ass. And hey, if nothing else, Andromeda by its very presence at least makes the ending of Mass Effect 3 somewhat palatable. All in all, I think it's a huge shame that EA is ending the series here. DLCs, the promised single-player DLCs that they later cancelled, could have redeemed Andromeda, at least somewhat, if they'd played to the strengths and addressed some of the weaknesses. I've seen DLCs that have done this before. And one shaky entry doesn't mean the entire franchise is bad, it means it had a bad day. So, you know, I don't know if this is our fault, the fanbase's fault, for complaining. Maybe EA always planned to toss Mass Effect out into the cold long before Andromeda even launched. But, you know, it did get a lot of hate. Let's be honest, it was the gaming internet's fucking punching bag for about 6 months between its release and when the whole Battlefront scandal came out. It was just cool to hate this game, even for the stupidest, most petty reasons. Something about social... What? Then again, you know, what else is new on the internet? It's the internet. So stepping back, I'm not sure if any game could have lived up to the expectations here. Even the best Mass Effect game ever might not have lived up to the hype. And expectations versus reality can really kill a game. I mentioned Daikatana at the very beginning. Also, look at Duke Nukem Forever. By the end, they just didn't care. They threw whatever they had out the door because they, I think they knew we had such high expectations it was never going to meet them. Half-Life 3, same thing. That's probably one of the big reasons why they're not doing it. It doesn't matter how good it's going to be. We just have these colossal expectations in our minds, and whatever they put out isn't going to be good enough. So I feel deeply for BioWare Montreal. Those guys, damn. They were a support studio before this. I think the most they'd done was DLC. I don't know for sure. I don't know if this information is publicly available. And EA management, the higher-ups, were like, here's this super big IP that's very important to us. Make the next entry in the series after, 5 years. Oh, and we're transitioning technology. Oh, and we're giving you some stupid rules to follow. Yet, they managed to pull through. They produced a finished, polished game. Late? Yeah. Broken? Perhaps. But it's not the worst horror story in the industry. And their heroic Herculean efforts were rewarded with massive outrage and the closure of their studio? That sucks. Anyway, this is not a review. I'm not going to assign a rating. I will kind of recommend Andromeda. It's not perfect, but if you're a fan of the series or you like this type of game, I think it is worth giving it a shot. Mostly, I just wanted to get all this off my chest. So yeah, there it is. As always, please like, share, and subscribe. Check out my Twitter for updates. Check out my website. Check out my other content. I'm doing some cool retro hardware stuff right now, but there's plenty of very varied content coming down the pipe. And see you next time.